So this is a bit of a formality. I think you all are familiar with the Small Community Air Service Development Program grant. In April, Port staff submitted an application to provide a federal revenue guarantee to an airline that would be providing new commercial air service between Port Angeles and Seattle. We were selected in June 2016 for $200,000 revenue guarantee grant. And it helps reduce the financial risk to any airline starting up in the first year. On page 2, it's kind of got a summary of all the incentives we're offering an airline coming in the first year. So that $200,000 is in place with the grant. The port and the Port of Seattle and the Port Angeles community, specifically the city of Port Angeles, have agreed to $133,000 in marketing for the first year for an operation that's 5 times daily, flying a 9-seat aircraft in between Port Angeles and Seattle. There's actually a sliding scale depending on the number of seats and the frequency of operation.
Now, Jerry, for that 200,000 that you, is that a number they gave us, or how do we determine that versus $1 million or 500,000?
It had to do with what we thought we could reasonably get. Had some telephone conversations with Ben Munson, who has been a consultant on getting a new airline here, and he thought that was kind of the sweet spot for the other type of applications that might be put in, plus what might be a really attractive dollar amount for a smaller scale operation, a 9-seat type aircraft, and so that's where it came about.
So can you tell me a little bit more about that $200,000 revenue guarantee grant? Does that mean if their gross revenue is $199,000, they get $1, or do they actually just get $200,000?
No, they do not just get $200,000. In theory, they could get zero out of this. But what it does is it allows an airline to be more aggressive with their scheduling, and really go out there and try and put a broad operation in place. And then if their revenues end up being a little bit below, then the grant will backfill up to $200,000 a year.
So is it gross revenues?
I believe so, yes. I haven't seen the grant offer yet. That's supposed to come in this coming week.
Okay.
But that's the idea, just to take some of the risk away. My understanding is there's some sort of agreement between the federal government and the airline on about what their costs and their operations should look like, and then they go and add 5 to 9 to 10% onto that, and they say, okay, that revenue level we're going to guarantee up to a maximum contribution of $200,000 by the federal government. So there's a little bit of negotiation that happens.
Okay.
So as mentioned, $133,000 in direct marketing support, an additional $129,000 in in-kind contributions from the Port Angeles and the Port of Seattle. That has to do with waiving landing fees and waiving terminal rents and that type of thing. So staff is recommending that the commission, upon concurrence from Port Legal Counsel, accept this small community grant when it arrives probably in this coming week, and authorize the executive director to execute the grant.
So I have a question here further. So I'm totally supportive. Yeah, there's a grant. We want to support that fully. But I go back to, okay, the marketing piece is, that's if they're 5 times flights 5 times daily on a 9-seat aircraft.
Right.
And so let's assume if you have, seems like they're going to have a whole lot more revenue to break even if they're doing 5 times daily, and with a 9-seater. I mean, that's what, 5 times 365, that's 1,800 plus flights every year.
Right.
And
Times 9.
Should be more than that.
Well, that's times
The
seats.
Yeah.
But so, and the one of those seats is a pilot. But so, yeah, you've got 1825 times, let's say 8, so you have 14,000 seats that we're saying if you have that, then you get this 133,000. But so 200,000, if that was the goal to meet, divided by 14,600, that's, the flights would be selling for $13.70. And so the two don't really mesh up. Between what we're saying is, we'll give you 133,000 in marketing support. That's great if you do, you know, these 5 times daily, but then over here, all we're guaranteeing is 200,000 of revenue. It seems like the expectation for the marketing dollars, you have to, what would, let's say, you know, $50 a seat or something, or 100.
The revenue is gonna be whatever it is. And both the revenue and the costs will be part of kind of this negotiation with the federal government and the airline of what do you think it looks like, you know, and hopefully they'll have some real marketing data behind that. But that's when they'll take that, whatever that number is, and they'll add on 5 to 10%, and they'll say, okay, we'll guarantee that your revenue meets this.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think you're gonna get ridiculous pricing from the company. They wanna
Right.
be successful long-term. This is just more saying if they fall a little bit short, there will be up to $200,000 that could backfill to bring them up to this minimum revenue guarantee. So it
Yeah.
takes some of the risk away from their operation, where they can bank on having that much revenue the first year.
Do you get what I'm talking about? If, which is a big if this small community air service development grant guarantees total revenues up to 200,000, and that's all they were gonna make is 200,000, and beyond that they get 0. If they made 400,000, $1 million, whatever. But if it's 200,000 and we're telling them they have to have 5 flights a day, that they need to make a heck of a lot more than 200,000 to even, I'm sure, cover their costs.
In other words, you're saying the 200,000 isn't much of an incentive for 5 flights a day.
Right,
Well,
I would think it'd be, they need to make $1 million if they're gonna have 5 flights a day.
Well, we're not telling them how many flights a day they have to have. This marketing incentive was just based on an example that we think is realistic.
Oh, so they're not committed to 5 flights.
No.
Okay.
And we don't even know who this airline is. And we're also not saying that the revenue is only gonna be 200,000 a year. Their revenue could be more.
Right.
Quite a bit more. Hopefully will be more.
Yeah.
Okay, and so it's just that whatever that agreed upon target is between the federal government and the airline, they're gonna add a little bit on there, and the 200,000 will backfill between their true revenue and whatever that target is. So the 200,000 kind of fills a little channel. It's not saying their revenue is only going to be
I see what you're saying.
200,000.
Okay. I get
Okay.
it.
Another way to look at this, they may have an agreement with the government, they can know, you're supposed to make, 1.5 million in total gross revenue. If it comes in at 1.4, we'll backfill 100, to
Okay.
get you from 1.4 up to 1.5.
See why he's the finance guy?
No, that makes
It's
sense.
not a bottom line guarantee, it's just, we will.
Forget that I used to be a finance guy.
Yeah.
It's just a guarantee to get to a minimum revenue level.
Okay.
That's between the federal government and the airline.
To give them a little more margin.
So when they create their plan, that if they don't meet their revenues, they can have up to 200,000, so it's not gross, okay.
Yeah, a plan that the federal government has bought off on, and
Okay.
this is realistic.
Okay, got it.
Thank you.
Now it's making a lot more
Crystal.
sense. Yeah, okay.
Well, I'd make a motion that, we accept, the US DOT Small Community Air Service Development Grant, and authorize the executive director to execute the grant upon concurrence from legal counsel.
Second. We have a motion and a second, any discussion? Okay, hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And
Right, I'm sorry.
it carries unanimously, thank you.